Marissa Carter thought the letter slipped under her door was harmless, but within hours she was sick and terrified. Detective Nathan Brooks soon discovered it was only the first move in Eleanor Whitmore's deadly game of poison, secrets, and midnight confessions. Marissa Carter had always believed her town was safe, the kind of place where nothing more serious than a parking ticket ever happened. She lived alone in a modest brick house across from the library where she worked, her days filled with the quiet comfort of organizing shelves and helping children find their favorite books. But one chilly night in late autumn, that sense of safety was shattered. When she returned home after closing, she found an unmarked envelope slipped under her door. Its surface was plain, no name, no stamp. Just a thin white rectangle that seemed oddly out of place on her welcome mat. Thinking it was nothing more than a misplaced note, she picked it up and carried it inside. At first glance, the letter inside looked ordinary. One sheet of paper with a short handwritten message in blocky, uneven letters. It read like a warning, though the words were cryptic, almost like a riddle. As Marissa studied it, she noticed a strange powdery residue clinging to the edges. She brushed her fingers against it without much thought, only realizing moments later that an odd metallic taste lingered on her tongue. By morning, she woke with a pounding headache and nausea that refused to subside. She told herself it was a simple flu, but the letter continued to gnaw at her mind. A few days later, whispers began spreading around town. Others had received similar letters, anonymous, threatening, and carrying the same unsettling powder. A local shopkeeper mentioned hers had smelled faintly bitter, while a schoolteacher claimed her skin burned for hours after touching the page. None of the letters were signed, none contained a clear reason for their existence. The townspeople grew uneasy, watching their mailboxes with suspicion and avoiding casual conversations they once enjoyed. The ordinary act of receiving mail had become a game of chance, and each delivery carried the weight of dread. When the first serious illness struck, fear gripped the community. Harold Jenkins, a retired chemist who lived alone near the edge of town, collapsed only hours after opening his letter. He was rushed to the hospital, his body weak and trembling. Doctors could not find the cause at first, but soon identified traces of a rare plant toxin in his bloodstream. The discovery changed everything. What had seemed like a cruel prank now revealed itself as something deliberate, something deadly. The police cordoned off Harold's home, treating the letter as evidence. Forensic teams worked late into the night, yet the envelope gave up no clues, no fingerprints, no recognizable handwriting, not even saliva on the seal. The news spread quickly, and the town's sense of unity began to unravel. Neighbors avoided one another, worried that the poisoner might be someone they knew. Trust became scarce, and every unexplained sound at night felt like a threat. For Marissa, the thought of the letter haunted her more deeply than the sickness it caused. She replayed the moment over and over in her mind, wondering why she had been chosen, why anyone in their quiet community would want to hurt them. As she sat in the library one evening, staring at rows of silent books, she realized the peace of their town had been broken forever, and the mystery of the letters had only just begun. Detective Nathan Brooks was called into the case when panic began spreading faster than the poison itself. He was known as a man who thrived on solving puzzles that others abandoned, and the sheriff hoped his presence would calm the growing storm. Nathan arrived in town on a cold morning, his coat pulled tight against the wind, carrying little more than a notebook, a sharp eye, and years of experience in uncovering the hidden truths people preferred to bury. From the moment he stepped into the police station, he felt the tension that hung in the air. Officers whispered about the poison letters, residents crowded the lobby demanding answers, and fear seemed to settle in every corner. His first task was reviewing the evidence, but there was hardly any to work with. Each letter had been handled carefully by those who received it, leaving behind smudged surfaces and contaminated samples. The powder, when analyzed, revealed a substance derived from plants that were not easy to find. It was neither common nor widely known, but it was effective enough to make the victims weak, sick, and afraid. Nathan realized immediately that the person behind the letters was no amateur. Whoever they were, they had knowledge of toxins, of the town's history, and of how to leave no trace. The second victim was a schoolteacher named Lillian Price. She had found her letter tucked between bills in her mailbox, folded neatly and carrying another cryptic message. Within hours of opening it, she felt a burning sensation in her throat, followed by a rash that spread across her arms. Though she survived, her testimony only deepened the mystery. She had no enemies, no disputes, nothing in her past that might explain why she was targeted. Nathan began to notice a troubling pattern. The victims weren't random. They were respected members of the community, people trusted by others, people whose removal would leave holes in the town's fabric. As he walked through the streets, Nathan could sense the fear turning to suspicion. People avoided eye contact, locked their doors earlier than usual, and whispered accusations about neighbors who had lived among them for years. It was exactly what the sender of the letters seemed to want: division, paranoia, and mistrust. Nathan understood that if he didn't find answers quickly, the community would tear itself apart long before the poisoner struck again. He spent nights combing through old records, searching for anyone who might have a grudge against the town or its most respected citizens. What he found unsettled him. Years earlier, a series of quiet scandals had unfolded: an affair that ruined a marriage, a financial scheme that cost locals their savings, and disputes that had never been resolved. These events were buried in time, but Nathan suspected the poison letters might be connected, as though someone were dredging up forgotten sins. Despite his growing theories, the investigation refused to yield hard evidence. There were no cameras catching the culprit in the act, no witnesses who saw suspicious figures lurking near the victims' homes. The only constant was the letters themselves, always appearing in unexpected places, always carrying their deadly dust. Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that the poisoner was close by, watching every move, feeding off the fear they created. The mystery had grown darker, and Nathan knew he was facing not just a criminal, but a mind bent on control. The weeks dragged into months, and the town seemed trapped in a cycle of dread. Each time life began to feel normal again, another letter appeared, reigniting the panic. By now, there had been 5 known victims. Some survived with lingering illnesses, while others lived in constant fear that their exposure had caused lasting damage. Every envelope carried the same chilling hallmarks: cryptic phrases, uneven handwriting, and the faint residue of poison that was never quite identical from one letter to the next. It was enough to keep the experts guessing and the community trembling. For Detective Nathan Brooks, the mounting cases were a reminder that time was running out, and the poisoner was always one step ahead. He began studying the letters with obsessive care, searching for patterns beyond the words themselves. He charted their arrival dates, mapped their delivery points, and even timed the gaps between each incident. Slowly, a strange order revealed itself. The letters weren't random. They were spaced apart with precision, almost like the sender was following a schedule. Even more unsettling was Nathan's realization that the victims were connected by subtle threads. Each had been involved, knowingly or not, in events that painted the town in a darker light. Marissa, the librarian, had been the quiet keeper of records, privy to secrets others might have wanted forgotten. Harold, the chemist, once gave expert testimony that cost a wealthy local family their reputation. Lillian, the teacher, had been rumored to cover up misconduct at the school years earlier. These weren't just townsfolk chosen at random. They were people tied to a past filled with betrayal, shame, and silence. The most disturbing clue came when Nathan S.'s team discovered a partial fingerprint on the inside flap of an envelope sent to the Mayor S. office. It was faint, smudged, almost as if left unintentionally. When run through databases, the match stunned everyone. It belonged to Eleanor Whitmore, a woman who had lived in the town nearly 2 decades earlier. She vanished after a scandal involving her family, moving away under whispers and judgment that most had long forgotten. There had been no trace of her since, no mention in records, no indication she had ever returned. But this fingerprint suggested otherwise. Nathan dug into Eleanor's history. She had once been a bright, ambitious young woman, well-liked until her family became embroiled in financial ruin and rumors of fraud. While the town quietly moved on, her life seemed to have collapsed in the aftermath. The more Nathan read, the more he realized she had every reason to harbor bitterness. She had been abandoned, mocked, and erased from the community's memory. Now, years later, it appeared she had returned with vengeance in her heart and poison in her hands. But there was still a puzzle Nathan couldn't piece together. How had she managed to stay invisible? How could she deliver letters across the town without anyone seeing her? He began to suspect she was not only back, but had been living among them in disguise, blending seamlessly into the very community she despised. The thought chilled him. It meant she could be watching, studying, perhaps even standing near him in plain sight as he searched for her. The town's paranoia wasn't misplaced after all. The poisoner wasn't just a faceless shadow. She was a ghost from their past, quietly rewriting her story with every toxic letter she sent. Nathan's suspicion that Eleanor Whitmore had returned grew stronger with every clue, but suspicion alone wasn't enough. The townspeople were demanding answers, and with each passing week, the letters grew more venomous in tone. They no longer carried only riddles or vague threats. Now they named names, exposing personal secrets buried for years. A shop owner was accused of stealing money from his partner decades earlier. A respected church leader was hinted to have betrayed his own family. Each letter struck like a knife, turning neighbor against neighbor, peeling back layers of trust until almost nothing remained. The poison wasn't just chemical, it was emotional, infecting the town's spirit. Nathan realized that whoever was sending the letters was not only seeking revenge, but also taking satisfaction in watching the community implode. To find Eleanor, Nathan dug deeper into the letters themselves. He began analyzing the cryptic language, noticing small details that hinted at personal knowledge of the victims' pasts. Certain phrases echoed old newspaper headlines, others matched entries in archived town records. Late nights at the library turned into endless sessions of connecting dots, and one truth became clear. The sender had access to information no outsider could possibly know. The only explanation was that Eleanor had been quietly collecting details for years, building her campaign of vengeance piece by piece. Following that lead, Nathan traced unusual library activity from the past few months. Someone had been pulling decades-old town records, not online, but physically, late at night when few were around. The sign-out sheets bore false names, but the handwriting was consistent. Surveillance cameras near the back entrance of the library revealed a blurred figure, often hooded, slipping in during quiet hours. The image was never sharp enough to confirm identity, but Nathan felt sure he was closing in. His breakthrough came in the form of a discovery at the abandoned paper mill on the outskirts of town. The building had long been a forgotten landmark, crumbling with age, its walls scarred by graffiti. When Nathan and his team swept the property, they found signs of recent use: discarded food wrappers, a makeshift bed, and most disturbingly, a locked room hidden behind stacks of rotting wood. Inside was a chilling shrine to obsession. Maps of the town lined the walls, marked with pins for each victim. Notebooks filled with names, dates, and grievances sat neatly on a desk. And in the center of it all was a box filled with envelopes identical to those that had been terrorizing the community. Some were already addressed, sealed, and dusted with a faint powder. Others waited, blank, as though prepared for future victims yet to be chosen. Among the evidence lay the most personal clue yet: a letter addressed to Nathan himself. It was not mailed, not delivered, but left on the desk as though waiting for him to find. Its words struck him cold. The writer praised his persistence, taunted his inability to catch her sooner, and hinted that she had been closer than he realized. She wrote of standing in crowds while he searched, of watching him from the shadows. The implication was clear. She wasn't just hiding, she was playing with him. The abandoned mill wasn't her home, but a stage, and she had left the letter there as part of the performance. Nathan understood then that the hunt had become personal. Eleanor wasn't only targeting the town, she was targeting him. The night the storm rolled across the hills, Nathan felt the end of the mystery drawing near. The abandoned mill had given him Eleanor's name, her obsession, and her methods, but not her final move. He couldn't shake the image of the letter left for him on that desk, its words written with such calm precision, as if she had been preparing for this moment all along. The threat wasn't vague anymore, and it was directed at him, and that made the investigation more dangerous than ever. He doubled his patrols, checked his own mail with gloves, and avoided routines that could make him predictable. Still, the sense of being watched never left him. It was as if Eleanor's eyes were always just out of sight, waiting for the right moment. The following morning, an envelope slipped through the slot of the police station's front door. Its surface was damp from rain, but the handwriting was unmistakable, uneven, blocky, the same style that had haunted the town for months. Inside was a letter far longer than any that came before. Nathan spread it across his desk, scanning the words as his stomach tightened. This was not a threat. It was a confession. Eleanor wrote of her years in exile, the shame that forced her away, and the fury she carried like poison in her veins. She explained how she had studied plants and toxins, teaching herself the delicate balance between sickness and death. She described returning to town disguised as a drifter, sleeping in abandoned places, and blending into crowds as though invisible. Most haunting of all, she admitted she had chosen her victims carefully, not for what they had done to her directly, but for what they represented. The hypocrisy, the silence, the cruelty of a community that had turned its back on her family. The letter ended with a revelation Nathan hadn't expected. Eleanor confessed she was tired. The campaign of fear had served its purpose, but the weight of it had broken her. She knew the police were closing in, and rather than vanish again, she had decided to end it on her terms. The letter contained instructions leading to a secluded cabin deep in the woods outside town. She wrote that she would be there, waiting for whoever dared to confront her. Nathan gathered a team and followed the directions that same evening. The storm made the journey treacherous, mud swallowing their boots and branches snapping overhead, but they pressed on. The cabin came into view like a shadow rising from the earth. Its windows glowed faintly with candlelight. Inside, Eleanor sat at a wooden table, her hands folded neatly, a stack of journals beside her. She did not run when they entered, did not fight as she was handcuffed. Her eyes were steady, almost relieved. She whispered nothing, offering no resistance, only the faintest smile as though she had finally unburdened herself. The arrest closed the case, but the scars remained. The townspeople never fully recovered from the months of suspicion and fear. Relationships were fractured, trust was broken, and the memory of poisoned letters lingered long after Eleanor was gone. For Nathan, the mystery was solved. But the image of that woman sitting calmly in the candlelight would haunt him. Midnight had brought her confession, and though justice was served, the shadow of her revenge would forever hang over the town she once called home.